Join me as I talk with people who express their creativity in ways that can inspire the rest of us to recognize our own creativity. What if you had a way to metabolize or process everything that you're going through? The difficult things, the wonderful things, and everything in between. That's what our conversation today is all about. Hi, and welcome to Creativity Conversations. Today, we're going to have a little bit of a different kind of conversation with my dear friend Peggy Conway. Hi, nice to see you. And what we're going to talk about, which I think is really important for those of you who are not quote unquote professional artists or creative types, is to hear why it's important to have a way to express yourself creatively when words just don't do it. And one of the things that Peggy said to me earlier when we were talking before we got on the podcast is she has this great phrase called creativity on demand. And the difference between that and creativity for personal expression. So, Peggy, take it away. Tell me about how this has transformed your experience of dealing with the kinds of challenges that you've faced, especially more recently.
Um, I think when I look at creativity and creative expression, I see those as two very different things. Um, and when I look back at my entire life, I always saw creativity had a place in my life. Um, and the expression of that creativity took many different forms throughout. And as a child, I remember being extremely creative. Um, and being the youngest of five, that creativity and that expression of that creativity was almost a tool for me to achieve recognition of validation or find my place in the family, as being different than my siblings. And and it's kind of interesting that creativity kind of then continued on, and I went to college for art. And I always told my father I want to be an artist. I want to be a true artist. I don't want to go into, marketing or production artistry. I want to stick with being a real artist, and I ended up going into marketing and advertising. And that process, and specifically, I was an art director, creative director, all that. But I was still doing creative work. I was still designing logos and brochures and branding campaigns and all of that. So I was still using my creativity, but as I termed it to you earlier, it was creativity on demand. And through that creativity on demand, I received a different kind of validation and affirmation. Okay. I received a salary, compensation, and titles, right? Um, but when I look back at it, the creativity and the validation, I never felt 100% fulfilled, you know? And it wasn't until the last few years when I closed down my own personal marketing design business that um, creativity and creative expression started to take on a different form for me.
Yeah.
It started to become a tool or a means to an end or a joyous experience or a path to curiosity or exploration. It just suddenly the doors opened on not only the creative expression, but how it served me.
Mm.
It's suddenly creative expression um, could help me to work through fear or anxiety or um, problem solving. And I specifically um, honed my creative skills into pottery. And and I had always loved working with my hands, but I specifically loved clay and mud and that tactile feel, and it just connected to me at levels that any other, whether it was painting or, working the boards or oils or whatever I was doing, nothing quite did it as much as feeling the earth.
Yeah.
It was very grounding for me. So,
So let me just jump in if you don't mind, because I think you're referring to some things that are really important when we're trying to work something through and trying to maybe find a way to express ourselves when words just aren't enough. And you're making pottery now and doing some pretty amazing things, and you're also teaching. So I would love you to talk about, what do you see with your students? How getting into the clay, using their hands, making things, what does that do for them? Does it make them more intuitive? Does it make them trust themselves more? What do you see that that does for them?
I would say all of the above and more. Um, when I started my classes, which was about 5 years ago, I opened a little studio here in my house, and I get maybe five people in my classes, but I do like 3 classes a week and for months, and but I have a group of women, well, probably about 50, that continue to come back year after year after year after year, and the journey that they've been on is just, to me, is the most fulfilling thing I've experienced. I would have, when they would first come to the, I remember there's one gal, she was a police officer in her previous career.
Wow.
Um, and she came in and her energy, she was so uptight, that life experiences, a funny gal, just but really like tight. And she just was looking for something to kind of, you know, I'm not sure what she was.
Loosen up.
So we took the first class, and we were doing this. Um, we were making a bowl, simple bowl, where you would roll out the clay, you put it in a bowl, and you shake it a little while. And it's a really good introductory class. And she got in there, and she was just lifting up the clay and pounding at it, lifting up. Well, the whole piece collapsed. Rolled it up, and she says, "I'm going to leave. This is never. I can't do this. I can't do this." And I said, "Yes, you can." I said, "You're learning that you have to listen to the clay. You're going to see how the clay responds to you, and it responds to your emotion, right?
Yeah.
You rough with it, the clay won't respond." And so I rolled her out a new piece of clay, and she ended up making, the bowl. And she was like, "Wow, I did it." I said, "Yes, you did." So I'm back in 2 weeks, and we're gonna glaze it, and teaching her the process of glazing. She has come to, probably since then, 20 or 30 classes. And she'll come in, and she has horrible arthritis. It's uncomfortable, it's painful, but she loves it. She loves how it makes her feel. She loves how she has told me, I can zone out of what's going on in my life for this 3 hours and just enjoy what I'm doing. And that's what a lot of people say. It really gives them um, an avenue to just kind of be in their own thoughts, be in their own feelings. And there's a lot of people that are going through so much, in their daily lives. You just don't know. But when they're all in that room together, we all forget about it. and we all kind of support each other, and help each other work through, um, uh, whatever it is that they're, trying to create, but also what they're trying to work through. I can
Yeah.
wonderful situations where somebody would just you could just see they were just so upset and it had nothing to do with the play. It's just what they were working through. And I'd see other people recognize that and then come over and give them positive reinforcement about the piece they're making. Like
Mhm.
it really had nothing to do with the piece they were making, but other people were becoming intuitive, as you said earlier, intuitive to what's happening here. So I don't want to say it's a spiritual experience, but um it's a journey into a space that
Yeah.
is a privilege sometimes to be a witness to. You know,
Wow. So, that's so important, and I know there's so few people that I talk to that have that kind of an outlet. And one of the things that we were talking about briefly beforehand was this idea of, um, creative, metabolizing creatively metabolizing our experience or processing it might be an easier way for people to understand it. Talk a little bit about that because I know that you've had your own challenges in your life recently with your own health and your husband's health. And how has being able to have a way to work through your feelings and your whatever your body is telling you at the moment, how has that helped you?
I think for me, um, whether it's a specific emotion that I'm experiencing, whether it's fear or anxiety uh, or maybe uh, I've just got so many things to plan in order to deal with whatever situation is coming up. All right. Um, Sometimes it's just too much for the brain to process, and you want to just shut down. So what I used to do is I would just go take a nap, try to and there, solve it. But it didn't. You'd wake up and you'd be like back to 100, 100 miles an hour. So so what I have found is that when I'm really struggling with a specific emotion, I'll either pull out my sketchbook and just or go on Pinterest and start looking at paintings or ceramics or whatever, nature. And just by going through that process, all of a sudden I can start to visualize how I would transfer that to pottery. Okay. Um, and what I have found when I really look back on the last few years and at some of the uh, situations that have been occurring, I can look at how my pottery changed to mimic, um, at least I can see it sometimes, whatever I was going through, So
Say that again. It has done what?
sometimes the pottery will mimic the emotion or the whatever the experiences that I'm going through.
That's fascinating. How do you see that? Say more about that.
Well, um, if I'm so I just made a piece a couple weeks ago, and I was just like, just so much going on, you know, and it was almost like, I'm sweating the small stuff and I'm sweating the big stuff, and I gotta stop sweating, you know. So I just went out to the studio and I said I know I want to make a fish. I want to make a fish on a stand, but I want him to be not a realistic fish, but I just want to do this. So I started working it. It changed a few times. Well, then he ended up being this really angry looking fish, with the teeth and you know, and when I was done with it, I was like, wow, it makes me smile. All right.
Yeah.
Even though he's a mean looking fish. but I'm smiling at the end of the process because the anger came out and is in camp.
Yes.
Frustration and the anxiety is in camp. It's not here.
Yeah.
And and I find after pottery, my shoulders come down, my body loosens up.
Yeah.
So that's kind of just one example. And then I had, sometimes my work is very I'll make a generalized piece. Let's say it's just a square base, right? But the graphics I put on it can be very frenetic, can be very, chaotic, or they can be very soft and gentle. And it really has to do with whatever I'm processing at that moment in my life. And what has been interesting is I can't envision my life without doing some creative expression. And my husband, who has Parkinson's, um, he used to draw.
Mm.
It was a very, with pencil drawing, and he could do portraits. And I have yet to get him to pick up, a pencil. Now, he can't draw anymore because of his tremor. And I said, but that's okay. Go to charcoal, go to crayon, go to something that I said, whatever you create, it's going to be beautiful because it's still coming through that process. And I said, and I think it would be a wonderful series of artwork through your hands with this, you know, debilitating disease, you know. So I'm working on them.
It reminds me of people who have uh, one form of disability or another, that they have a tremor or they have what they consider a limitation on what they can actually express, and yet they find something, whether it's using a really wide brush so they don't have to worry about details, or just that opportunity to, as you say, with that description of getting those feelings that can be harmful to us, obviously, those biochemicals that start flooding us when we have a lot of feelings going on, and we put that into something else. There's something very transformative about it. And it's just, if people, what my wish is that people, whether it's a paintbrush or clay or whatever medium strikes your fancy, is just to have that opportunity to quiet the mind and get into that heart space that you were talking about earlier, and how that is so leads me to that question that I wanted to ask you, which is, how do you see creative expression being essential rather than recreational? I mean, you've answered that somewhat, but I know you have more to say on this.
I think when when you can use creative expression um, to your benefit and recognize that it has benefit, right? And and it's not easy to do because we're so busy. We're so busy
Mm.
with life that we almost feel like, well, this is a waste of time. I only have an hour and this is a waste of my time. I really should be doing this or that.
Laundry.
And I think that it can't become essential until you allow yourself to um, give yourself that gift of that time, you know.
Mhm.
And for a lot of people, and again, it took me till I was 60, you know, to give myself the time.
Mm.
Suddenly, um, you know, priorities surfaced. And I think this is where I'm headed with this. I think as life changes, everybody's life journey is different. And I think as you're confronted with different challenges and the way you solve things in the past doesn't work anymore, or maybe you just can't solve what's ahead for you. Okay.
Yeah.
So you have to find ways to deal with it. Okay. And we're never really allowed, I think, as human beings to develop our own sense of um, self worth in a way, or our self healing, or our, looking inward to solutions. We always look outward first,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Yeah.
And and it's really been interesting because in these last few years, as I as I've become more um, successful in my creative expression, right? I've backed away from uh, taking a medication that is a solution, is a quick fix, right? Or I've backed away from certain foods that were comfort foods, right? Which ultimately didn't provide any comfort, but provide discomfort. So, um, so if you can allow yourself that gift of, I want to say, I want to say self-awareness, but if you can just allow yourself to say, the tools that I had in the past brought me to this place. Now, what other tools do I have inside of me instead of relying on everything else? Um, and if you can just kind of allow yourself to explore some of those different avenues, all of a sudden, and this is what happened for me, um, my diet completely changed. Like I said, my reliance on, I have a headache, so I'll take an ibuprofen. No, no. I'm gonna sit. I'm gonna think about what it is that's causing you this headache. I'm gonna massage the back of my neck. I'm gonna take a walk, and and again, or I'm gonna go to some pottery and just see what happens. You know, and ultimately you forget about the headache. Or you forget about the joint pain or whatever it is.
Right.
So I think it's, to your word earlier, it's a transformative creativity, creative expression is transformational. And it's in ways that you don't realize until you take a step back and you have a conversation like this. Like if you had asked me last week, I would be, I never thought that deeply about it. But as I think really where I am today versus where I was 5 years ago and how I deal with my health convictions, you know, it's very different. My perspective is different. My patience. That is the one thing that create creativity and pottery has taught me is
Mhm.
patience. Patience with myself, patience with other people. But I think most important is patience with myself, you
Mm,
know,
mhm.
and you know, and I don't get as frustrated about everything, okay, like I used to, because um I have a way to
Right.
live with it.
Yeah. You have an outlet for it. I think it's so I really love what you're saying. I think it was Einstein that said creativity is intelligence having fun.
That's interesting.
That that idea, that permission slip that we seem to need to give ourselves to just doodle or just fuss around with some material and just to get that out of ourselves instead of trying to analyze and trying to figure things out. Because most people, especially if they're still cranking it out in their jobs, they're on overdrive all the time. They're thinking all the time, trying to figure things out and plan ahead. And that's a terrific skill. And yet it leaves, I think, be interested to hear what you think, it leaves a void, it leaves a part of ourselves out that, as you're talking about, it shapes you when you allow yourself to go there. And I think that what you're saying is really uh, so important to emphasize that the intellectual stuff is great. It's important, it's necessary. We got to be using that left brain. And when you can do it well, yay. And yet, there's the right side of the brain and bringing it together with the left side of the brain and with our hearts, as you were saying earlier. And it just sounds so, it's so great that you have been able to find this and share this with the students that you teach.
Yeah, and that's another gift that creativity can give you. It it gives you that personal growth and evolution and development, right? But then it also gives you, um, for me, it my teaching has taken on a more holistic approach, right?
Mm.
I've taken many classes from many teachers, and oftentimes it was very, you know, tutorial or however you want to say it. You know, it's
Yeah.
rote, um,
Yeah, yeah, very linear.
linear. Right, right. And I would say my classes in the very beginning, it was like, oh, I've done this way. It's got to be done this way. And but over the years, um, it's more about when the gals come in and I say, okay, today we're going to be making, you know, whatever. And I have an example of it. And I will say to them, now, yours does not have to look like mine. You know, this is just an idea of, of where we're going to start. But what I want all of you to do is let whatever happens happens, and you create the piece that speaks to you. And and that's when they have the most fun. I will have girls, they'll go to the other side of the studio and they'll start going through boxes looking for certain things that they want a certain texture. They want I didn't say a word. I didn't say a word. They are now, instead of just duplicating what I made 5 years ago, like they're looking and they're saying, what can I create myself? That is that, you know, and just to sit there, and lots of times I'll just sit there and watch them. And I have a big grin on my face because, you know, the gal that the police officer, she's over there, she's getting all her texture, she's just going at it, and it looks nothing like mine. Or even the shape of it. Completely changed, So yeah, so I don't remember the original question. I went off on a tangent there, but um uh, yeah, it's an amazing process of transformation if you allow it. I always go back to that. It's just recognizing it that it has a place, you know. And I started it. It's funny because I started out by saying like creativity has always had a place in my life, right? And it served different purposes, right? But I controlled what's open. I
Yeah.
got permission. I wanted validation, or I wanted, success, to be judged, to be whatever, right?
Yeah.
Now it's not that at all.
It's for you.
For me. Yeah.
That is such a really good point. Because I know exactly what you're talking about. We're raised in a culture where it's externally facing. How's this look? Is it going to be successful? All of it is outwardly driven. And yet what you're talking about, the benefits of what you're talking about is this is process now is inwardly driven. And that's a whole different thing. It's freedom. It's it's a whole avenue of allowing yourself, talking about intuition, what wants to show up, what's wants to emerge, what's go come to the party. You know, it's not a work deadline. It's a creative opportunity.
Creative party. And when your piece is done, and this is the biggest change I think I've noticed too in myself. When I look at a piece that's done, now it's not, oh, that's a little crooked, or oh, I don't like that. That doesn't match that. Now it's, wow, look at how that texture interacted with the glaze there. I really like that. It's very, rusted, or it's very ancient looking, or whatever it is, right?
Mm.
So, and I just, there are certain pieces that I will stare at for hours. And there are certain pieces, they come out of the kiln, I wrap them up, and I put them away. Um, and then there's certain pieces that I go back, I take them back out of the box and stare at them. So yeah, yeah, very inward, as you said. And there's a lot inside that needs to come out, needs to be, expressed. Um, and I think that having creative expression, no matter what form it takes, um, should be part of like a wellness plan,
Yeah.
a wellness diet. It really has to be, because, um, you know, it, it's a part of you that, like I said, society has just not allowed you. There's just so much external pressure,
Yeah.
a certain way to do a certain thing, to make a certain amount of money, all this, you know, who's got time, you know, but it is, to me, it's the base, it's one of the five food groups or whatever, if we still have
That's great.
it in, but yeah, it's still part of the basic food group.
That's so great. So I have one last question for you. When people say, "Oh, I could never do that. I'm not creative." What do you think they're really saying?
I'm saying they're afraid they're not good enough. They're afraid that they'll be judged. They're um they lack the confidence, right? So, and I get that all the time. I get that when I'm at an art show, and it's so funny because someone will come up to me and they'll be looking at my work, and it's almost like my intuition kicks in, and I'll say, "Have you ever done," I start a conversation, "Have you ever done pottery?" And they're like, "No, no, I'm not creative. Like, I didn't do this." I said, "Well, I teach classes, and uh, and all my classes are designed to for beginners." I said, "So if you've never touched clay," I said, it's just something that, anybody can get. Do not," I said, "everyone is creative in their own way." So, and then they sign up. They sign up for a class.
Well, you must be telling them something that resonates with them despite the fact that they think they're not creative. Something in them wants to be.
Permission. I really think it's saying it's an external force saying you have permission to explore something that maybe you've been told all your life you're not good enough to do,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And isn't it a shame that there is such pressure on people
Mhm.
for creativity, you know? And
Mm.
it's kind of sad, really, because and I see it down here where I live all the time, because we have people coming in 6 months a year, and they're all retired, you know, and everyone is looking for something to try. It's almost like you can feel it in the air, and it's like, well, I'm gonna try jewelry making, and I'm gonna try this, and I'm gonna try that. So people are becoming aware.
Mm.
Age thing? I think it might very well be an age thing where, we've gotten to a certain point where we can start to think about ourselves. Your
Yeah.
family, the kids are grown, the pressures are different.
Yeah.
So we can take the time. And I think that's what's happening. So um but yeah, I go back to I think it's a mission.
Wow. And wouldn't how I'm just thinking what it would be like if you or you in the generic sense gave yourself permission in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s, in the middle of a hectic job, in the middle of raising a family, in the middle of people being born and people dying and just all of life happening. But to have an outlet that's just yours, it's not for anybody else. When you're still in that stage as a really healthy balance between what you have to or want to do in the world as an expression of success, however you define it, or I should say, and the space for yourself, that time, that permission to, I'm just going to do what this feels fun. All those years of people comparing themselves to famous artists. I'm not creative because I can't paint like so and so, or I'm not a musician because I don't sound like so and so. So what? We that comparison and the judgment that you referred to, it's deadly. But to have that space for yourself, even if it's an hour, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, just to doodle or put some color on a piece of paper. So important. A sixth food group member. Oh gosh. Well, this has been so nice to be able to talk to you about how it's changed you and the people that you work with. If people wanted to get in touch with you, how would they find you?
Well, I kind of hide on no, you could m- message me through my Facebook account. I don't actually have my business online or my pottery. It's really word of mouth and whoever is drawn, you
So
know,
you're on Facebook.
yeah, just as me, Peggy Conway, you know.
Okay. Well, we'll put that in the liner notes.
Um, but yeah, if anybody wanted to, I could share my phone number with you and with the best.
Great. That's great. And do you have any last pieces of advice, recommendation, encouragement to people who might not yet have given themselves permission?
I think that don't don't go into any creative journey with expectations or trying to plan it. You know, for me, it's pottery, but for someone else, it might be pressing leaves into a book or,
Mm.
you know, um, or walking along a trail and picking up, you know, certain rocks and then coming home and putting those rocks in an arrangement. I think the two things I would say is number one, don't put limits on what creative expression is
Mhm.
and be open to um, those those signs, that are right in front of you when maybe you're watching something on TV and you spot a painting in the background on the wall. And you just think, boy, I really like those colors, or somebody's wearing a jacket that you like the texture on it, the pattern. It's creativity is in everything,
Mm.
even in how a room is designed or how furniture is placed. So I think it's opening that um opening your vision and your mind and your heart up to what is creativity and defining it for yourself, not putting any limitations on what it means. You know.
Okay, Captain, I'm on it. And thank you everyone for listening or watching, and we appreciate your being here. Stay tuned for the next episode. So bye for now.